The story of the Tata Nexon has taken an arc that's pretty much the exact opposite of what happens to a car over its life cycle. It's been around a while, but instead of sales fading away, the Nexon is now one of the best sellers in the cutthroat compact SUV segment. Tata Motors has managed to do this by making incremental changes to the Nexon and widening the range enough to offer something for everyone. Now this may be the most striking update to the Nexon yet, but does it follow in the same footsteps? With this facelift, the Nexon takes quite a bit of inspiration from the curve concept in its styling. To this end, there are a few more changes than you would otherwise see on a mid-cycle update. The bonnet and front fenders have been reworked to go with the new front. The split headlamp look is now increasingly common, but the Tata Motors interpretation is one of the better executed ones, with the gloss black top accent and the DRLs incorporated into this discreetly. The detailing around the large low grille is thoughtful and helps reduce its mass. The full LED lighting, again in a deep vertical indent, is a good complement to the face. It's discreet when not in use, although unlike competitors, Tata Motors continues to offer fog lamps. It's a clever design that's not too fussy or loud, but still draws attention with its clean execution. Expectedly, the changes to the Nexon aren't as extensive in profile. The distinct contrasting window line accent has been done away with. It goes with the more mature theme of the design, also seen with the crisper treatment to the C-pillar that brings the roofline in line with the new look. The most noticeable addition here though is the aero-focused alloy wheels. Wheel sizes haven't changed, but these go with the linear theme of the lighting and draw attention. At the rear, the lighting is the biggest draw, with the full width signature looking especially premium, a fact amplified by the welcome swipe it does, right up there with some luxury brands. The wiper has now been hidden in the spoiler, much like a Land Rover, and a more prominent boot lid brings this in line with the front. Boot space hasn't changed, so it's not the most spacious but easily accessed by a low loading lid. The addition of a 60-40 split should make the space more manageable though. Now that very striking contemporary theme from the outside carries over on the inside of the new Nexon as well, and just like the outside, it merges with what was already an offer with the Nexon pretty well. So for example, this top panel hasn't changed all that much of the dashboard. It's still got a nice texture to it, but this middle section is where really a lot of work has gone in, and it's become so much more contemporary, as you can see, with these horizontal themes. Now there's great texture here. This was a theme in the old Nexon and that's carried over here too. You notice this sort of faux carbon fiber-ish texture here, which feels quite nice to touch. The air vents, for example, they've become slimmer, but they also function with a bit more heft. They feel of a higher quality. And this panel, which is contrasting purple in this particular car, you can have it in an all black shade. This too really, at least visually, makes a big impact. It seems to enhance the feeling of plushness in the cabin, makes it feel more premium. But to be honest, we would have liked for it to have been softer. It is soft, but not overtly so. You still think that there is a plasticky sense to it. But really, one of the most impressive additions is the new infotainment package in the Nexon, and you start with this 10.25-inch screen, which immediately takes the Nexon from having one of the weakest touchscreens in the segment to pretty much right at the top. There were some glitches in the time we spent with the Nexon, which we were told would be fixed, but as it stands, both the new 10.25-inch screens are vibrant and intuitive to use. Touch responses are crisp, and phone pairing is seamless too with the wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. The widget-based navigation makes most functions within easy reach, almost enough for you to not miss physical controls except for the ones for the audio. The smartphone-like sub-menus are similarly thoughtful and come with a host of kit like Alexa voice assistants and sound modes for the new 9-speaker JBL sound system. The redundancies in the touch panel below are tied in well with the screen's functions. It's not as easy to use as the earlier physical dials and buttons, but the new toggle switches for the climate are tactile, and capacitive panels are well executed for what they are with the large buttons. The instrument cluster offers up quite a bit of information cleanly and is easy to toggle through. The various views are well thought out too and offer a range of customization options. Especially useful is the Google Maps feed in this screen that makes navigating much simpler. If anything, we would have liked slightly larger fonts. But at this point, you also realize that the Nexon has been around a while, and that shows in the kind of practicality that you get. As you can see, again, there are no cup holders in this version again as well.
which is a bit of a worry. You can use the cup holders that are inside here, but of course they aren't all that great to use in, say, when you're moving or so on and so forth. And you have more charging sockets this time around. You have a Type A and a Type C port, but they are a bit difficult to reach, especially when you want to plug in a wire or some sort of that. The door cards haven't changed all that much. They have been sort of upholstered, if you will, but with different materials, but the design itself has remained exactly the same, which means that the door cards, again, you have space to put a bottle inside here, but really they could have been wider. And again, you have this small center console here, which is useful but not overtly so.
A greater sense of quality comes from the dark capacitive panels for the center console and the glow up Tata logo in the new steering wheel. There has been a consistent improvement in fit and finish levels with every new Tata offering, and that continues here too, although the Koreans still have a clear edge. That said, the new shifter for the automatic variant feels especially premium. It too seems inspired by Land Rover's latest with a crisp toggle action and good finish.
Now, things haven't changed all that much in the back, to be honest. You do have new seats, which is one of the more important changes, and to be honest, they work as how you would expect a Tata seat to feel. I mean, you have quite a bit of under-thigh support. In fact, you are sort of lifted up considering this big bulge over here. Although the shape itself has been sort of shortened, I feel, a little bit from what I remember of the Nexon. So maybe that was also done to free up a bit more space. The cushioning itself has changed. Even the backrest has become a touch more rounded off. There's a bit more contouring to it, which some of you might like, some of you may not. It's again that typically Tata's slightly firm cushioning, so over long distances you should be quite comfortable. Another change that you notice over here is this new headlining. It's really feels quite premium and soft. It's black, so with this purple interior, it does work. It's quite different from what you would otherwise imagine, in a small compact SUV. Now, other new additions, finally you have these Type A and Type C charge ports. These were a big miss in the earlier Nexon, and finally they've been corrected. You also have a nicely upholstered central armrest, which is quite nice to use. Now, in terms of knee room, for my size, there's a decent amount of space. You can see there is this is how much leg room I have, and I have enough space to put my feet underneath the front seats, so I'm comfortable. It's still a bit cramped. There are more spacious competitors to the Nexon, and again with this bulge in the center, third passenger will have it a bit difficult, placing their feet, and especially with this protruding design of this third spot may not be all that great, although you do get 3-point belt. Now, in terms of headroom, you do notice that this scooped out roof does help, although again, if you are anywhere close to 6 feet tall, this is going to be a cramped space for you. Considering I'm not anywhere close to 6 feet and there's still not much headroom for me, that will be a concern.
A vast list of features is tied in with this. You get ventilated seats, connected tech with remote engine start-stop, a PM 2.5 air purifier, height adjustment for both front passengers, auto headlamps and wipers, and a single-pane sunroof being the highlights. This Nexon hasn't been tested to the newest crash regulations yet. You get an especially handy 360-degree camera setup with blind view cameras and a 3D view. The high quality screens and cameras in many angles make navigating tight situations simple, especially with the blind spot cameras. Aside from this, there are 6 airbags, an auto dimming inner mirror and TPMS.
Now, expectedly, given that there haven't been too many mechanical changes, the experience of driving the Nexon hasn't changed all that much. So you still have that quite sloping windscreen in front of you, and you can see the edges of the bonnet. The bulges are still there, even though the bonnet itself has been reprofiled. The bulges are still there, so you can see the edge of the bonnet. Although with these new larger wing mirrors taken from the Harrier, the already quite thick A-pillar is even more obstructed by these. So yeah, you do have some pretty large blind spots around this area of vision. Now, coming to the drivetrain, the new sort of option or new combination that you can get is the 1.2 turbo petrol with the 7-speed DCT. Now, it does have 120 PS and 170 Newton meters, which are par for the course in terms of how powerful the engine is. And of course, a turbo petrol and DCT combination usually means for an exciting driving experience if you go by what we've already seen in our market so far. But the Nexon doesn't do it that way. It takes a different approach. It's generally much calmer experience. The drivetrain seems to have been tuned for the kind of driving that we're doing, calm, sedate driving, where you aren't pushing the engine all that much. You're letting the gearbox do what it wants to in the background. The engine also is not being put through a lot of stress, and this is where the Nexon in this petrol DCT combination feels the best. Now the gearbox, it does quite a good job, I must say, of ironing out whatever lag there might be in the powertrain, and quite unlike those really sharp-edged, hard-edged shifts that you would expect from a DCT, it changes gears much more calmly, much more softly. Now coming back to more spirited driving, you can drive it more spiritedly. The gearbox doesn't sort of have a sport mode. You do have these 3 drive modes which change power output slightly. They change the throttle response and the steering response. So in that sense, you can slightly sort of change around the driving experience, and to go with that further, you have these paddle shifters. And keeping with that Range Rover theme for this gearbox, you notice that the shifters themselves are again very heavily inspired from what you might find in a Land Rover or a Range Rover. They are of very similar shape. They have a nice cold feeling to them, and yeah, when you do use them, they work well enough. The gearbox obviously becomes a bit quicker to respond, and again, the engine being as calm, as soft edged as it is, it's not one which likes to be pushed hard, but if you have to at a pinch, then yes, the manual control does help. We would have liked for there to have been better refinement from the engine, especially when you're starting up. Here that the engine rattles, there is quite a bit of vibration coming through. So in that sense, that could have been better.
Tata Motors has slightly reworked the suspension, but generally the Nexon rides and handles like it used to earlier. So yes, like most new Tata cars, there's a firm edge to the ride at low speeds. This is well done, but you do feel larger potholes and broken surfaces filter into the cabin at these speeds. This improves noticeably as speeds build and the Nexon becomes solid and comfortable feeling on the highway. That said, we would have liked for there to have been better steering feel. It's light enough to not feel tiring, but it could have been more direct. Turning in, it's not quite precise and you are somewhat second guessing the car's movements. You also sometimes have to put in small corrections at higher speeds. This aside, there's good body control. The Nexon leans into turns quite predictably and makes for a stable driving experience in these situations. In this regard, the slightly heavier front in the diesel seems to keep it better planted than the petrol.
Now the Nexon can also be had with a diesel engine. Now this motor is again carried over from the earlier Nexon and pairs with a 6-speed manual. Now it makes 110 PS but 260 Newton meter. So immediately you notice that we're driving this one on the highway, which will probably be where it's at its best. Now the turbo petrol I already mentioned was a good, mile munching machine in that sense, and this one of course takes that up a few notches. Now this 6-speed, it's useful. I mean, the clutch is light, which helps, so you want, and the placement of the clutch too isn't all that bad. You don't get a dead pedal considering the footwell is slightly cramped, but the clutch is light enough, so you can find the bite point easily. And changing gears, now the gear box itself, it's not very crisp in that sense, but it's precise enough, so you can slot it into gear easily enough, doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Although the shift to second gear sometimes lags for some reason, right? It doesn't quite slot into second all that easily. And there's this lurch that you notice every time you shift into second. But this anomaly aside, it's pretty straightforward. Now as for the engine's performance, now again it's more laid back than exciting. Now there is some lag, of course, as you would expect, considering that this is a manual and the gearbox can't sort of tune it out. But once you're up and running, once you reach say about 2000 RPM, you hit that wave of torque, that flat wave of torque, and then it's really quite smooth sailing. Yes, the engine is noisy, but to be honest, the vibrations coming through the steering wheel and the pedals are actually slightly less or somewhat similar to what we found in the petrol. So in that sense, there's not much to choose between the two. Yes, in the city, it might take, some rowing between the gears, but again, like most diesels, you have that really useful, that pleasing almost wave of torque to play with.
We expect the refreshed Nexon to be priced about Rs 1 to 1.5 lakh more than the existing versions given the extensive feature additions. With this facelift, Tata Motors seems to have worked on strengthening the Nexon's positives. The DCT does smoothen out the Petrol's performance, but we would have liked to have seen better refinement to go with this. That said, the Nexon now looks special and comes with a cabin that feels more premium in look and in the tech that's packed in. Pair this with the great value that Tata cars usually promise, and this update should see the Nexon continue on its upward trajectory.